The following talk is offered freely to ensure that no one is ever denied access to these practices and to these teachings. If you feel inspired to make a donation to support this offering, you can go to my website at jonathanfoust.com. While you're there, you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter designed to support you in your practice. Thank you, and enjoy.
The other day, my wife and I went into town and went into a shop. We were only there for about 5 minutes. When we came out, there was a cop writing out a parking ticket. I went up to him and said, "Come on, man, how about giving a senior citizen a break?" He ignored us and continued writing the ticket. I called him a mindless Nazi. He glared at me and started writing another ticket for having worn tires. So my wife called him an unthinking fascist tool of the corporate state. He finished the second ticket and put it on the windshield with the first, and then he started writing a third ticket. This went on for about 20 minutes. The more we abused him, the more tickets he wrote. Personally, we didn't care. We came into town by bus. We try to have a little fun each day now that we are retired. It's important at our age. So once again, this opening story has very little to do with tonight's talk, but I'll tie it in somehow. Actually, tonight's topic is on decisions and how you might draw on this practice of non-judging mind, non-judging awareness, to help you make more wholesome decisions in your life. So there are 4 main areas I'd like to explore with you. The first is the importance of contemplating your bad decisions and the importance of contemplating cause and effect, which is integral to deep decision making. The importance of contemplating your body, using your body as a feedback tool when you make decisions. And the importance of contemplating your internal state, where you're at an optimal state for making decisions. It's a really cool process I found really helpful. So I saw this diagram. It was like written up on a chalkboard. And the question was, sell my kidney on the black market? It was con, illegal, surgery, they might take both, they might take everything, death, will I pee more? On the pro side was easy money, tax-free money, cash money, a lot of money, big payday, more money than I make in a year, no risk, no reward. And at the bottom was money. So much of our choices are driven by emotion. And actually the emotional function is a critical part of making decisions. And there have actually been cases where a certain part of the brain is damaged through an accident. And that part of the brain that is really the emotional center, when that's not functioning, these few people it's happened to they have no decision-making ability whatsoever. So part of it is learning how to tune into your emotions in a wholesome way. So it was in 1982 or 1983, I was in the Peace Corps on the edge of the Sahara Desert in Niamey, Niger. And I had this idea. I had met someone who really inspired me, and I decided I was going to cross the Sahara Desert on my bicycle after I finished up my tour. And it had never been done from the south to the north, but it was like a rallying cry for me. I was 22 or 23, on top of the world. I spent a year and a half preparing for it. and I was in really, really good shape. I actually, this was before mountain bikes and like seal bearings and fat tires. I met someone who had a bike shop in Switzerland, so I had like a specially outfitted bike with tied and soldered spokes. And I brought that back the bike back with me, and was ready to set out on this amazing adventure across the Sahel, which is like mostly gravel, and then into that crossing. It was a really bad decision. I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life, and it's an interesting reflection. What are decisions in your life that you regret? What would you say are your top three? Wow, I wish I hadn't done that, or I regret the suffering I caused. So what gets in the way of making good decisions comes right back to sort of one of the key things in Buddhist philosophy, the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. That your mind is colored so much by desire that may take you away from a truly wholesome decision. In that same way, your mind is so clouded by aversion or hatred or ill will that you make decisions filtered through that color that take you away from your purpose. Or the mind is filtered through delusion or confusion, just not seeing clearly. And the decisions that come out of that state have certain consequences. So a lot of it is seeing the ego and seeing the story that you are telling about yourself. And for me, back in West Africa at age 23, with all my great wisdom, I had told everyone I knew that I was doing this. And I had this whole narrative, and I wasn't explicit, but internally, it was a real heroic narrative I had going. I was going to cross the Sahara and then stay in the Hogar Mountains with these monks in Sekram, and then I was going to go to Algeria and had places to stay, and I was going to do photography and play music and make my way around, go to Italy, learn Italian, this whole world thing. And I was really attached to that story. And there was another problem. The main problem was that there was the hot season that came early. And hot is really hot. Where I was not uncommon for it to go into 125, 130. And the Harmattan winds, these dust-laden winds, were terrible that year. It's like, it looks like a fog, but it's a fine dust. So it was a really bad decision, but I did it anyway. I took off, and I ended up the dust was creating chronic nosebleeds, even though I was wrapped up, and whole breakdown happened from there. And then I ended up crossing the Sahara, but with my bicycle in the belly of the plane. I became anemic as well. So I think of that in ways as a really bad decision, but on the other hand, I am so grateful for the path that put me on. When that one ended, something else opened up, and I've had a truly, truly blessed life. So a few of the bad decisions through history. I'm just imagining the conversation. One person saying, no, that's a stupid idea. Let's fill the Hindenburg with hydrogen instead of helium. And that was a decision someone made. Or, look, I'm Napoleon and I can do whatever I want. I say, let's invade Russia. It'll be easy. Followed by, look, I'm Hitler and I can do whatever I want. Let's invade Russia. It'll be easy. So the world is full of bad decisions. And there's actually a really interesting study now. I've never run across this before. It's someone who makes a case for what's called neuroeconomics. Paul Glimcher. he talks about how neuroscience and economics should be more closely brought together, because how we make decisions is a really interesting process. Your brain consumes 20% of your energy, even though it only takes up 2 to 3% of the mass. So it's an energy machine. It just takes so much energy. And so it's a battleground between precision and efficiency. And that's why you start getting confused when you're standing in the aisle in the supermarket and you see 500 kinds of coffee and you're supposed to pick one. You're just overwhelmed. They've done these interesting studies with primates where the monkey, let's say, has an option. Here's a cup of juice and a jug of juice. Really easy. And they can watch the neurons that fire in the brain. And then they make another offering. Well, here's a jug and an almost full jug of juice. And then the decision-making process takes more brain power. And then here's a lot of really good juice, and here's half a jug of really, really good juice. More brain power is required for a decision that's complex. And so when you have really complex issues, your brain gets totally consumed by the challenges. If you want to buy a house, well, where, how much, what size, what style, what toning, what kind of floors do you like? I don't like those drapes. So we get overwhelmed with all the bandwidth it requires to make decisions that have so many different faculties going on to them. And so we tend to make emotional decisions, and we just hope for the best. That's really where a lot of our decision-making comes. It's kind of an emotional thing, and you hope for the best, but it may not be really clear, and it's possible to clarify it, I think. So one researcher said this, and I actually kind of tried this one on. He said, rather than pick what I hope is the best, instead, now I always start by eliminating the worst element from a choice set. So that's a really interesting approach. If you're buying a house, eliminate all the areas where you don't want to live, figure out the top end of what you're wanting to spend, write down all the styles that you can't stand, and then what you're left with is a much more narrow selection. And there's a reflection that I really like to do, and sometimes when I've done this for myself, when I'm kind of lost, like, what's my purpose in life? What should I be doing? And so if I'm working with someone or in dialogue with someone who's like, I just don't know what I want, it's really simple exercise. It's really helpful. Write down everything you don't want. Just on one side of the column, write down everything you know you don't want. And then on the right side, write down the opposite of that. And it actually gives you it can give you some clarity around what it is you really most want to create in your life. So one element here, when you have a decision to make, is to pause and contemplate the outcome. It's really being mindful of karma, cause and effect. So when you pause and ask yourself, well, what is the effect? It can be very, very, very helpful. My grandfather was born in extreme poverty. I just found this out from a family member twice or 10,000 times removed, but his name was Mike Kaiser, and he explained some of my lineage to me. I just found this out this morning, that there's one side of the family that comes from Central Europe in Western Germany near Belgium. They probably had relatives who had some opportunities and were sharing about how good things were, so they were kind of ready to move out of kind of a depressed area. They moved from New York to Chicago, taking small trains. And then a lot of my ancestors, there was a 1 mile 1 mile radius limit around Chicago where you could have no alcohol at one point. So all my relatives set up, they were farmers, but they set up taverns exactly 1 mile outside the rim. My great-grandfather fought in the Civil War, volunteered and fought in the Civil War, and had a whole bunch of kids, and I had, I think, 9 children, and then died from his wounds from the war. And my grandfather was one of those kids. And as you can imagine, without the male, his mother raising them by herself, he was farmed out really quick. So when he was 5 or 6, he lived in a barn watching the cows. And he spoke only German. And he had some decision to make, and I don't know the details, but as I've been thinking about him, there was something in him that decided that how he was going to direct his life. He learned English. He put himself through school. He put himself through college. He went through engineering school. He worked on highly technical projects, managing the power systems for the first tunnel under a river in the United States. And I wonder, how did this poor German-speaking kid in a farm in rural southern Illinois create a life that he created? And the result of what he created, the karma of that, as a result, without my knowing it, he saved every penny he made, and he created a fund for my education, his grandchild, that put me through a Quaker boarding school and through college and gave me a life that I might not otherwise have, which has inspired me to do that for family members. So the outcome of whatever decision that was, he may have made that decision from desire and greed. You know, I'm going to be a hero to my family and show them all. That might have been part of his drive. He may have done it from aversion and hatred. You know, I'll never live in a barn again. I'll never be poor again. Or he may have made it out of some kind of delusion or confusion. Well, I guess the next thing is to go to school, and maybe he kind of made his way that way. But just contemplating the cause and effect of that is really helpful. What if he were to say, and maybe on some level he did, what if I just stay here and do nothing with my life? What's the outcome if I do that? And what is the outcome of doing the next best thing I can do? It can be helpful. Sometimes I find decision-making to be helpful, to try to break down a decision into something binary, an A or a B. And that helps you to kind of get a little bit of clarity into it. And one of them is about sort of contemplating cause and effect, but using the body as a sounding board, as a very reliable sounding board. So a little experiment, if you like. You can close your eyes. One decision you'll probably have to make is what you're going to have for breakfast. So as a little experiment, let yourself come up with 2 possibilities for breakfast. Option A and option B. And then take a moment to sort of relax your throat and your heart and your belly, relaxing to the midline. That's where we tend to feel. And you're looking for an internal response. It might be strong. It might be very, very subtle or flutter. It's often called the felt sense. And if you would, just select one of those options and just tell yourself, this is what I'm going to have for breakfast tomorrow. And as you think about that, What do you feel? What do you notice on the inside? And then if you like, you can kind of let that fall away and then think about option B. As when you think about having that option, what does that feel like? What felt sense forms on the inside? And then if you like, you can just let this fall away. And you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. Did one of them feel a little more right than the other? Just curious. Yeah. Did anyone just want to have both? The body can be a very powerful feedback device. And sometimes when you're making a decision and you do that pause, one is the sense, well, what's the outcome I want from this? And the other is to really tune into the body. Well, if I try that, what's my body telling me? Sometimes there can be either it's going to feel a little more alive or maybe a little closed down, a little more dead inside. So, of course, what mindfulness tells us is that we react to life all the time. And when you can pause and open up that gap between stimulus and response, there is an opening for non-judging awareness that can help you to see and feel and act a little more in accordance with what you really want. So it's about pause before you act. You may be familiar with that acronym WAIT. When you're with someone, WAIT stands for why am I talking? It's a great way to let me just pause here for a moment. Another thing about the pause, so we have, pausing to notice cause and effect, pause, tune into the felt sense of the body. Another is to pause and gather more information. I was listening to an interview with the writer Daniel Pink, and he told a story of how he went to law school without talking to anyone about it. He just assumed it would be great and he'd do fine. And when he got there, he absolutely hated it. It was exactly the kind of work he knew he didn't want to do for the rest of his life. And so, of course, he went through a lot of churning and burning. He took a leave of absence. He may have gone back and tried again, but ultimately realized it wasn't for him. So he has this term that he uses, that he calls it surrogation, which basically means talk to other people who've done this. And he realized for himself, if he had really talked to someone, who had gone through law school recently or gone to that law school and told them what it was about, he never would have made that choice. So there's a really interesting reflection there. When you have a decision to make, is to really ask yourself, do I really have the information that I need here? Is there a bit more information that might inform me to make a more mindful decision? So, of course, the pause where you ask yourself, how do I want to feel at the end of this? I find to be tremendously helpful. And it's something I find I can use in little pieces, little segments of my life. And of course, I do it for every talk. How do I want to feel at the end of this talk? How do I want you to feel? What do I want you to take away? It helps to redirect my intention. So, using your body as a feedback device, it's a really helpful tool. I was recently in conversation with someone, a super bright guy, had a vision for a company he wanted to create. And it really aligned for him. It was a service he could provide. At the same time, he could provide for his family, have time with his kids. And he raised enough money to give it a go. And like in any business, he had some snags. And he found, as sort of this business was changing and the roles he had to do, he really found that he didn't enjoy that part of the job. He could do it, but didn't really resonate for him. And he began to feel a sense of dread building. Whether this company was really, not only could it make it, but did he have the heart to push it to the next level, if that was even possible. And it led to, as you can imagine, a sense of paralysis inside. He believed in the product, but it wasn't happening fast enough. He was on the hook to some investors. He really wasn't fundamentally enjoying the process. But again, back to the complexity of making a decision. And so I asked him, if you could offload the business, what would that feel like inside? And I could just instantly see his cheeks got a little more rosy. He seemed like his whole spine elevated about a half an inch. And he just said it would be such a relief. And for me, that moment of really sensing it kinesthetically, when I think about stepping away from this, what does that feel like inside? Valuable information. And then, of course, it came down to, well, what are the options? One was to just pull the plug and walk away, or to find someone who could buy him out and really move it to the vision he had. Or another option, just to grind his teeth and drink more coffee and make it happen. But what happens is, of course, when you have a complex problem, there are so many different voices and energies inside. Initially, when he had this idea for the company, he really liked the idea of making this happen. He liked the idea, the flexibility it would give him, and how he would structure his time and be with his family. But now, because some of the things I sensed as we were talking, there was something inside of him that really liked the idea of moving on with his life. There was something that didn't like the nuts and bolts of the work that lay ahead. He liked the idea of what he could do if he wasn't burdened by this, but he didn't like the feeling of letting down his investors. He liked the idea of passing it on to someone who could just take it to the next level. But he didn't like the idea of having to go through the steps to find the right person. He liked the idea of finding more work that was more rewarding and natural for him and his talents. But he really didn't like the idea of having to hit the streets and kind of start over. He liked the idea of working with people and being collaborative, like he knew that. And he also knew that he really wanted to keep a connection with his family. And I just shared that because for me, I was so touched how each of these voices had their play. And we all have that. As someone said, we're run by committee. Different voices at different times sort of manage how we pay attention. Mindfulness, non-judging awareness, can give you the possibility of being aware of that voice rather than run by that voice. So, a little reflection, if you will. So you might again close your eyes. And you might just take a moment to reflect on some decision that you have to make. And it can actually be helpful to make it kind of a low voltage decision on a scale of 1 to 10, like a 4 or a 5. And of course, any problem that you have has an issue under it. I'm going to offer a few questions just for your reflection here and give you a little time to kind of investigate. When we explore the different parts of our awareness, and there's a part inside that we can think of as the controller. Can you imagine or feel that part? And there's a certain presence that we could call fear and anxiety. And can you sense how your body creates and holds fear and anxiety? There's a part that we could call the critic. You can imagine that part. Another part is the spiritual warrior. Can you feel that part? The adventurer. And just a sense for yourself these different parts that they play in regard to this issue and situation. Another question to explore. What don't you want from this issue or decision? What is the outcome you don't want? And what is an outcome that you would like? How would you like to feel at the end or at some point regarding this issue or decision? Another inquiry. What would you need to help you make this decision or execute it? What would you need? And if you had that, what would that feel like inside? And just noticing if your relationship with this problem or this situation has shifted in some way. And if you'd like, you can deepen the breath. And if you like, you can open your eyes. So those are some of the questions that can help open up something that may feel problematic, provide you with some information. And I wanted to say a little bit, and our time is coming to a close, how important it is to be aware of your state when you need to make a decision. There's this great story I love. It was, I think, John D. Rockefeller the first. When he had an important decision to make, he had a whole ritual he would go through. He would go to his club, he would play a round of golf, he would go to his room, and he would lie down. And then when he would get up, he would have his decision. Like that was sort of the ritual that he went through. Another story I love is of someone who was renowned for taking ideas and completing the patents. He was able to do this, like solve these problems, and made a huge amount of money. And someone went to interview him, a reporter, and he was the CEO of this company. And the secretary said, "Well, he can't see you right now. He's in his idea room." And so later he got to ask him, "What is your idea room?" And he showed him, and it was a simple room, nothing in it but a cot, a table with yellow legal pads and pencils, and a chair. And that's what he would do, is to go into there and create a state where he could do the kind of work he needed to do. So reflecting on a decision requires that you be in an optimal shape. So many of our decisions are made when we're feeling depleted or scared or afraid. So filling your cup can be helpful. There's an analogy or an acronym called BRAIN, which I ran across. I didn't know this one. When you have a decision to make, I'll put this in the email. The B is to ask, well, what are the benefits I need to look at? The R is, what are the risks? Identify the risks. A is, what are the alternatives? What else is possible? The I is, what does my intuition tell me? And for me, that's the feeling. And the N is to ask yourself, what if I did nothing right now? What if I just let it be? So it's a really interesting element to explore. How do you change your state in a way that supports you? Back to this fellow Daniel Pinker, he was talking about, he's done some work on making decisions, and he says how you really need to design your day by your energy. So for most of us, if you sleep during the night and you're active during the day, you may find that your peak is in the morning, and then the trough is in the afternoon, and then the recovery is in the late afternoon and early evening. So it's really helpful to design your life in relationship to the peak, the trough, and the valley. So in the peak is when you want to do your creative work. It's when you really want to get your brain focused. In the afternoon is when you might do your administrative work or answer emails. And then the recovery is more maybe reading or something like that. It's a very interesting thing to look at how your energy affects how you feel, your energy affects how you think, your energy affects how you sense kinesthetic intuition as well. So my time has flown. I have been throwing out chunks on this talk. But I thought we might close with a little reflection on this whole piece here. So if you like, you can close your eyes. And just in these moments to just sense the power of the pause. And what can happen just in a breath or two when you pause and feel and notice. And you might just sense, if you were to draw on more of this pause through your day or in your life, just these moments of resting in presence, if just for a breath or two. And notice how when you pause, you reconnect back in with the body. When you pause, you step back from the linear, rational mind. And you can sense for a moment this quality of non-judging awareness, where you're aware of the parts and the voices, or you might have more access to the mystery and what calls you. And honoring this mystery of that which calls each of us forward in our lives. You can deepen the breath and let your body stretch in a way that feels good. Well, thank you for following your decision to come here tonight. I hope that doesn't go in the category of bad decisions. A few announcements. Jennifer Stanley, are you here? Oh, yes. Would you like to say a few things about this training? Once you take the mic, yeah. Mindful self-compassion, that's great.
Hello. I have been teaching mindful self-compassion since 2014, and it's a beautiful 8-week course, and you could kind of think of it as when you make a bad decision, mindful self-compassion will be there for you to help you cope with the after effects. Its components are mindfulness, also common humanity, recognizing that other people share suffering, and then learning self-kindness. And you could think of it as like benevolence. You can think of compassion as like benevolence or goodwill, loving friendliness, kind of going along and bumping into suffering. And if that benevolence, goodwill, and loving friendliness can stay benevolent and friendly, then compassion arises. And that's what this course really teaches people how to do. So if you'd like to come up and talk to me afterwards, I'd be happy to do so. Also, Marcy, one of our students, is here to share her experience if you'd like to talk with someone who's taken the class.
Yeah, thank you so much. I just hear it's a wonderful heart training course. And Anna, I don't think Anna's here, Anna Johns. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, good. So they're two very cool things. Spiritual friends groups are twice a month where you get together with a number of other meditators. You sit for a little bit, and then there's some real mindful sharing of how you're applying the practice in your life. They're really, really wonderful things. Anna's going to be facilitating one, and there's information in a newsletter if you'd like to know about that. But for me, it's one of the most valuable things is you just connect in a very safe way, have some time to practice and share about your practice. It's really, really cool. Also, if you're interested in a free Telesangha group, Anna is also leading a group. Telesangha is way, way cool. There's an appointed hour, your phone rings, and you're connected to a class. And then Anna guides you and sort of facilitates that whole meditation process. It's a very cool thing. So thank you for offering that. I know a number of people who've been doing it for years. A friend of mine said, that the phone rings at 7, I'm on conference call, and it's really amazing, or headphones. He said, but then I realized I really wanted to be more ready for it. So now he's doing 20 minutes of yoga before the call, and he really thinks it's making a big change in his life. Mindful discussion group happening, not to be missed. Also, next week, my friend Shobhan, Richard Faltz, we've known each other forever through the ashram days. He was Kripala's president at one time, Kripala's lawyer for many, many years, and written a number of books on yoga, and a very deep practitioner. For him, really deep renunciate practice has been his life. So we both extracted ourselves from the community where we work together so closely. He bought a place in the Shenandoah Valley and has been doing really long, deep, extended practices for many, many years. And I'm luring him into town, and we're going to talk about the promise and the pitfalls of deeper practice. And I think it'll be a really fun conversation. And his wife, Dan, is coming as well, and astounding poet. So that's next week. Hope you can make that. If you want to be on the mailing list, a reminder that's on the back, and as always, thank you for your support for the class. I believe they're cookies, so watch that decision-making process as you near the table.